If you had to create it all over again, how would you do that?
What would you do if you had all the time and money in the world? Women look at each other and go, like, you too? Like, you're interrupted in a meeting too?
What was the one story that kind of stayed with you?
Actually, my name is Mohana, but I simplified it so that people can say Mona.
One of an uncomfortable or raw truths about yourself that you kind of realized through this journey.
Certainly, my relationship with money.
One thing that you'd always thought you'll buy for yourself and then you did buy buy it. What was that?
I didn't even want to buy my own toothpaste. It's currency, comes back to you. It's a current.
But I wonder how many times do women get paid less simply because they don't think they can ask for more.
Currently projecting to be, over 200 plus years away. And then in male dominated industries, who knows how long. They're going to say like, oh, Neha, it's not you. Like, no, you're perfect. It's them. They don't know what they're missing out, right? I think there's two most important life decisions you'll ever make if you want to progress. One, should you choose to have a life partner? And two, having a circle. Sometimes it's hard for people to understand what it's like to be you. Only you know what it's like to be you.
What would be the one message?
If you're looking to pivot, I would say to make sure you get your finances in order.
20 years from now, what are you telling yourself?
Good on you for taking the leap and the moment before you jump.
In this episode, I chat with Uma Thana Balasingam, who took 2 decades of corporate clout and turned this into leadership gold. From helming senior roles at VMware to co-founding Lean in Singapore and launching the Elevate Group, Uma has built movements that matter. She's also the voice behind Raw with Uma, where she flips the spotlight from power titles to powerful questions. We talk about midlife pivots, the myth of free work, and how a forgotten hotel toothpaste became a wake-up call for abundance. This one's for you if you are a woman navigating your next big career move, a founder secretly questioning what success should feel like, a leader ready to build impact, not just influence. What was the worst thought that you had in your head when you were writing that resignation email?
Well, actually, I didn't have to write a resignation email because I was made redundant. So, VMware went through an acquisition and my role was split into three. And so I had an opportunity to take a package and do the exit. So it's very rare that the company you work for gets acquired, but also I've seen that happen before and I wasn't a senior executive. Executives get a different package. So let's just say that. And that gave me the runway to kind of think about it. But I actually didn't leave thinking, I'm going to go do this. I knew I was going to do that anyway. And that stems from the last 9 years of building Lean in Singapore, which is all about progressing in the women in the workplace here. And that's a community of over 7,000. I actually had the next job lined up and that didn't come true.
If you had to create it all over again, how would you do that?
Helen Dews, when she registered the chapter, and we met at an event, and it's probably one of those stories where the powers of the universe come together. She asked if any one of us were interested to help her to build it. She didn't know what to do with it. And a bunch of us put our business cards. She randomly picked 5. I was one of the 5. I was the only one who stayed. So we ended up building it together. And I think what led me to that was a very powerful question that my mentor asked me to think about just before I met Helen. And the question is, what would you do if you had all the time and money in the world? And he would say he doesn't know the answer to that and that many people don't. So they keep shifting their goals and they say, when I get to X, I'll do Y. So if your X keeps moving, your Y will keep moving as well. So the question to ask is, what would you do if you had all the time and money in the world? And when we first started, we made a lot of mistakes in the first year. And I don't know if we would have done anything differently, but so many people wanted to be a part of it. And then when it came to actually doing the work and we would turn around and there's nobody behind us, right? So I think the most important thing we learned is that the people who stayed had a very strong why. And the second biggest lesson is that to run something like that, a movement that became, a community, you actually need some leadership skills. So if you have a lot of passion and you think that's enough, I would disagree with that.
Okay. All right.
Uh,
So now, what if those learnings, how have they come to play in what you're doing today?
Yeah, I think that was the beginning of building something bigger than myself, which up until then, I was very much on the track of earn more money and get to as far as I could get.
Hmm.
And then when you start hearing the stories back of, women coming up to you or they write to you and tell you the impact that they've had, you start to appreciate this thing that you're not even getting paid to do and the impact that it can have and the power of community, right? When women come together in a room for a leading event, two things happen. One is that women look at each other and go, like, you too? Like, you're interrupted in a meeting too? Oh, you mean your idea was also stolen? It's like, okay, I'm not alone. That's the first thing that happens. And the second thing that happens is, we give them the tools on what they can do about it. So they walk away going, okay, I now understand I'm not alone. I understand why it happens and I can do something about it. So I think in learning that, when I think about building movements and companies today, I think about the impact on the individual. So who are we serving? So who's the ideal customer profile? And so everything we do has to go back to that, right? Yeah. I mean, you've been doing this podcast for a while. So I even take it into my own podcast for Raw with Uma, when I was designing season one. Now I'm designing season two. I'm thinking of an individual and
Yeah.
whether the content serves that individual. That's your ICP, right? So
Yeah.
everything has to be centered to that one person. It should be a real person in your life and
Yes.
somebody that has a story, and you're doing it for her, right? But of course there's so many thousands of others, but I think that has been the common thread in how I build things today. Who's the ICP?
Yeah. Makes a lot of sense. And what's the single message for your podcast? I mean, if it was one line, what would it be?
Well, for season one, it's all about putting the spotlight on women in Asia in terms of what are the questions they're asking themselves when it comes to life and work. Because I feel like every other podcast out there is putting people in positions of power with titles. They've made it. And I really wanted to turn it around and put the spotlight on who is it that we're trying to impact change for. And let's hear their stories.
Yeah.
So that's the intent of season one. Season two is going to be completely different, and it's going to be focused on everything that I'm navigating as part of my own midlife reinvention. So
Yeah.
not crisis, reinvented.
No, absolutely. It's a moving wheel. It's always reinventing. And in season one, when you were sort of relating to the people that are actually going through all of this, what was the one story that kind of stayed with you most important? Like it was the most impactful one.
If I had to choose one, it was probably the episode with Mona. And she starts the episode by saying, actually, my name is Mohana, but I simplified it so that people can say Mona. And how many of us have gone through that, right? Especially as Indian women with very long names. I mean, my name is much longer than Uma, but if it wasn't for Uma Thurman, right? I don't know if people might butcher my name, right? So, um, and she went through a really difficult health crisis, had to have an operation, and she lost her ability of speech. And she was holding a high position in a company, and she was turning 50 and was asking herself, is this it?
That's what hits you the most, right? That it's something as simple as your name, and that signifies so much more. It doesn't need to be a big dramatic problem for people. It could be something very simple as your name. What was one of an uncomfortable or raw truths about yourself that you kind of realized through this journey?
I think like there's quite a few, but maybe if I had to pick one, Certainly, my relationship is money. And when I first left the corporate world and I ran out of toothpaste, my toothpaste finished. And so I'm privileged enough to have a helper here in Singapore. So she said, we gotta go buy a new toothpaste. Do you want the same one? Do you want something else? And I said, nope, we're not buying toothpaste. Like, let's look into the travel drawer. I used to travel like 192 days a year. So it's very fast for me to pack because everything's there. And I used to bring back all the minis from the hotel. And I said, let's look in the travel drawer. I bet there's toothpaste in there. And I took out my phone, and I'm like, who am I visiting this week? I bet they've got toothpaste, right? I didn't even want to buy my own toothpaste. And I had to reconcile with that. I was telling my best friend, and she's like, you better go buy the nicest toothpaste for yourself because you're sending this message to the universe of scarcity instead of abundance, right?
Yeah.
And so I really had to navigate this loss of a monthly paycheck, the comfort of that, the safety net of that, and sit down and do my own numbers and just feel good that I'm actually okay and I can afford toothpaste and maybe a lot of toothpaste.
Yeah. And once that shift happened, I don't know, what was the most, one thing that you'd always thought you'd buy for yourself and then you did buy it? What was that?
Yeah, I went into this art gallery and there was this series of paintings that was done by a French artist, but it looks really Asian to me, and they're all individual pieces. And you can buy them on their own. There's 16 of them, and they're so simple, but it's like a can of it's one of those Asian looking kind of containers that you would put, like my mom would use it to put her red powder, right? That she would use. Or even all the different colors used in Holi or even Songkran in Thailand. And I just fell in love. I was just staring at it. I took pictures of it. I went home. I dreamt about it. And then I was like, if I was still in corporate, I would have bought all 16 by now. It'd be in my house. So I slept on it for 2 weeks. I called my best friend. She said, how about you buy 9? And I said, okay, yeah, maybe I buy 9. So that's what I did. I bought 9. And every morning when I come down, it's the first thing I see. So yeah. And I think one of my friends has a really good way of thinking about money is that it's currency, right? So it comes back to you. It's a current.
Ah,
So the more you put it out there, the more it'll come back to you. But what she taught me is that every time you put it out, you just have this gratitude to say thank you because I can do this and I can buy this and, so thank you for the blessing and I hope it comes back to me.
yeah, that's extremely, extremely powerful. And again, completely resonates with, growth mindset, abundance mindset, all of those things. It seems very up in the air when you say abundance mindset, but these are the examples that kind of define what it really feels like.
Yes. And I also talk about in one of my episodes about and I think it's especially for women where we feel like we should do free work,
Oh yes. Oh
right?
yeah.
And it's actually the highest performing short right now, where I talk about, if you say it's not gonna, I did this. I'm the person, right, who said no, it's okay. I'll just do it for free, and I don't want to earn any money from this, you know, because I want to give back or whatever you tell yourself.
Yeah.
And I had another friend who was like, I don't care if you charge $20, but you gotta charge something. Because if you charge $0, you are telling the universe you want $0, right? I don't care if you give the $20 to charity. So that's another piece of this whole puzzle with money, my relationship with money and
Yeah.
abundance.
Yeah, absolutely. And I wonder how many, I'm sure that a statistic exists, but I wonder how many times do women get paid less simply because they don't think they can ask for more.
Oh,
So,
yeah.
it must be so much. And talking about women in the workplace, if you look at, a simple statistic like what is the number of female CEOs on tech in Asia, it's about 5%. Um, where do you think realistically this number should be?
Well, I think if half of the women were running the world, then and half the men were running households, then it should be 50-50, right? That's when we get to equity, but we know that's currently projecting to be, over 200 plus years away, and then in male dominated industries, who knows how long.
Yeah.
So yeah, it continues to be difficult, and so many things keeps throwing the spanner in the works right now with the Trump administration and the perception of DI being rolled back. I see all of those as good things, because if you were doing it as a check in the box, now you're really thinking about, okay, why did we do it in the first place, and how do we do it so that there is impact? I always look at it in three things. What is it that women can do to help themselves? What is it that leaders, men and women that have teams, can do? And then what is it that organizations can do, right?
Yeah.
I think it takes that triangle of equation in order to drive towards that, because we all have unconscious bias. And that for me has been the biggest thing. And people say, like, I don't see what the issue is, Uma, because you made it. Right? But, for a lot of women who have biases that, we have biases that we impose on ourselves. For example, women look at a job description, and if they meet 6 out of 10, you
Yeah.
know, they wouldn't apply, right? You feel like you must check all the boxes
Yeah.
and have a little bit more even before you apply for something,
Yeah.
right? And for men, 6 out of 10, and they apply. This is backed by research. And at a very large tech company that I was at, the CEO said in his company, it's 3 out of 10, and men would apply, right? So these are biases that we impose on ourselves. And that's why I think circles is the most powerful thing that a woman can do for her career. And this is very different to having a circle of friends, right? Your circle of friends think you are perfect. There's nothing wrong with you, right? So you can do no wrong. So if something didn't go right in the workplace, and plus not all your friends understand what you do, they're going to say, like, oh, Neha, it's not you. Like, no, you're perfect. It's them. They don't know what they're missing out, right? But having a circle, and this is like 8 to 12 people, we have hundreds of circles in LinkedIn, is where you can put a mirror to your face without a friendship tax, right?
Yeah.
It's where women can come together, be unapologetically ambitious, messy, and fabulous, right? So when you have a circle, they'd be like, yeah, Neha, you should go for that job, right? Now, how are you going to prepare for it once you get in, right? Um,
Let's talk about
so
that. Yeah.
these are the kinds of support we need, to be able to tell each other the truth, but we're so nice, uh, right? We don't want to hurt each other's feelings. And I think that's the little prompt that we can have control over,
Mhm.
in terms of, if you want to do more and progress in the workplace. That's the one thing I recommend, right? I think there's two most important life decisions you'll ever make if you want to progress. One, should you choose to have a life partner, who's that life partner? And two, having a circle.
Specifically on the circle, I loved it how you explained it in two different ways, right? So one is obviously your circle, the organization circle, and your social circle. And in that circle, which promotes what you are doing professionally and is a constructive is a space of constructive feedback so that you can grow better. Uh, you always will get things that you will have to actively go and fight for in a system that needs to change at pretty much every level, but at the same time is run by the people who need to change it, like you said, the male dominated society. And this is where for me the biggest sort of question comes up, is that do I then go and act how women are expected to act and still keep pushing my agenda, which might take longer,
Yeah.
or do I go in and break things?
Yeah.
Right? Which, in your opinion, is the way to go?
Yes. I think you have to choose your battles carefully. And overall, I'm a big champion to meet people where they are. because the only other option is to stay in your current position and wait for the world to change. So those, I think, are the two options you have. So what
Hmm.
does it look like to meet people where they are? First, I'm going to warn you that it does come with mental tax because
Yes.
you're going to have to pedal harder. So, when I'm in India, for example, the dynamics of Indian men working with Indian women is actually different, right? It's hard to see someone younger, that maybe is not dressed in a certain way, etc. So I'm going to meet them where they are. So if they expect women to show up in a certain way, then I'm going to do my best to show up that way. I'm going to build trust and credibility. I'm not going to compromise who I am because I have feminine and masculine qualities. So if I have to overly do the feminine, this is gender judo, then
Hmm.
that's what I'm going to do. So I build trust, credibility, I show up as you expect. And then once you get to know me, I'm going to pull you towards me,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
And I think that's how you create allies in the workplace
Yeah.
versus you stay in your position and you go, you know, he's difficult to work with or she's difficult to work with.
Yeah.
Um, so I think those are the two ways. And I do find like a lot of women do judge too quickly. And, but, they're speaking from their own experience and
Yes.
they're frustrated,
Yeah.
right? So I completely empathize with where they're coming from. And what I would say is try to be curious about what might be happening on the other party, right? Um, and I have this story about how you can, potentially do it. So, this is a story from years ago. So I have a female friend who gets a phone call from the CEO and says, "Congratulations, we're expanding your role. We're giving you more responsibility. You've been amazing." So she says, "Thank you so much." Now, most women would stop at that. They'd be like grateful. "Oh my God, thank you." Right? Um, and they won't even ask for, like, how is that
Yes.
going to be reflected in my pay? But she did. Okay. And the CEO said, "Well, we're going to see how you do, right? You should be grateful that we're giving you this opportunity instead of somebody else. So let's see how you do. And then let's discuss it next year in the performance review."
Hmm.
Now, again, most women would stop there and go, "Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, I'll just do it." Right. But what she said was this, and this person happened to have a daughter,
Hmm.
and the daughter was in her teens. So what she said was, "I'm curious," and tone of voice matters, right? So it doesn't sound judgmental or anything. "I'm curious, 10 years from now, if your
Mhm.
daughter finds herself in the same position and she gets this phone call,
Mhm.
what would you say to her? Should
Yeah.
she take the role or not?"
Yeah.
And he kept quiet and he said, "I'll call you back. Let me see what I can do."
Yeah.
Sometimes it's hard for people to understand what it's like to be you. Only you know what it's like to be you. And
Absolutely.
so if you can put them in a position to do a flip it, where they are thinking about their sister or their wives, if their wives are working, if not their daughters, then it helps to reframe for them what it's like to be you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So persistence, stability, but with grace. Like don't give up your ground, but do it in a way that is most acceptable. Is that a good way to put it?
Yeah, I think always do it with kindness and respect.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Um, 5 years from now, what's happening? What would this version of you look like?
I don't know. I'm eager to find out. I'm figuring it out day by day. I have some idea about, what I'm trying to build, which is a intersection of leadership, reinvention, media. Um, and it's a bunch of movements and companies, and it's a whole ecosystem. So I don't know where it's going to get me, or maybe 5 years from now, you find me back in corporate and said that did not work out and it was such a terrible idea. But I hope I can continue this path for a while. Um, and I think that's another thing about entrepreneurship. I think it's so much more beneficial when you do it at a later stage in your life because you've had experience at the workplace. Ideally, you're a manager or leader. You know, if you've run P&L, even better. If you've managed large teams, even better, right? You've had to deal with difficult people, with conflicts, with hiring, right? Um, and you are more emotionally mature. That
Yes.
you don't sweat the small stuff,
Yeah.
right? So I think there's a lot to be said to kind of start on your own later in life.
Yeah. Absolutely. And there is so much resilience, right? You can get back up and say, okay, let me give it one more shot.
Yeah.
I think both of us kind of speak to the same audience in the sense of women who are working in their later in their life and are trying to create a difference or trying to create a pivot in their lives. What would be the one message if it was a choice they were making?
Yeah. If you're looking to pivot, I would say to make sure you get your finances in order
Mm-hmm.
because when you make the pivot, you want to be very sure that you are sorted out. Because if you don't have the confidence in your own financials,
Mm-hmm.
you're going to find yourself making bad decisions for the business. For example, you're going to diminish your value. You're going to do discounts, right? You're going to do free work, right? You will chase anything and everything, right? You won't give yourself at least a year to learn before you pivot again. Because the first of your business should be about what are all the right things that will get me the right learnings so that I can pivot in year two. That should be the year one goal, right? And if you haven't started that, what I did was, very simple, like track for 30 days everything you spend money on. So you get a sense of where is your money going, and you'll be surprised, right? I was paying for so many subscriptions that I didn't even use, and I never bothered to look at it. It just came the credit card bill. I never looked at my credit card bill, and so I was paying for nonsense that I wasn't even using. So all these small things add up. So understand kind of what you need to operate every month,
Mm-hmm.
and can you change that a little bit by a change of your lifestyle if you have to. And then you know what's your runway based on how much you have, right? That gives you, I think, this peace of mind so that you can build your business with the right energy. And
Yeah.
I think that's so important. And if you're not there yet, start your side hustle in parallel to a job.
Yeah. Yeah. Or at least, or say, start saving up, whatever your circumstances allow, just go ahead and do something. Ideally, just do something, plan for it, start planning for it.
Yes.
Yes, absolutely, makes so much sense. And if I mean, an ending note, but one that I think will kind of all gives us all motivation at every time is 20 years from now, what are you telling yourself?
20 years from now, okay, so 20 years from now, I'm going to be 67.
Okay.
So what would I say at 67? That's 3 years from 70. Hopefully I am still in, I love colors. So I'm still in like fabulous colors. Looking back 20 years, I hope to say to myself, good on you for taking the leap,
Mm-hmm.
because I think that is the most important thing to me when I look back on my life is when you're standing at the edge of the cliff
Hmm.
and the moment before you jump is the most important, is what, you know, the thing that makes you go
Hmm.
forward and take the jump, right? Without the safety net. That I think is moments that define us, that split second. And so I hope to look back and say, that I had many moments of that, and I decided to make the leap anyway.
Fantastic. That sounds like a good place for us to pause, Uma. I hope very soon to speak to you again. Thank you so much again for taking the time.